King James I of England was originally born James Charles Stuart in 1566 in Scotland. Basically, as an orphan, his mom, Mary Queen of the Scots, had been sent to prison for plotting against her cousin, Elizabeth I, Queen of England, in order to gain the crown of England. She was later then beheaded. His father, Lord Darnley, the second husband of Queen Mary, was murdered before he could turn one, making baby James crowned king at just 13 months. In his upbringing, he would be given a good education but surrounded by nobles with evil intentions. Eventually, he would get kidnapped by William Ruthven, 1st Earl of Gowrie, who was a Roman Catholic. James escaped the following year and began to pursue his own policies as king. This experience would then follow James throughout his life, making him a paranoid person. After realizing Elizabeth I of England has no heir, he then aligns Scotland with England, eventually crowning himself heir to England's throne. In 1589, he marries his wife Anne, daughter of Frederick II of Denmark, who 5 years later gives birth to their first son, Prince Henry. He is able to play off Protestant and Roman Catholic factions of Scottish nobles against each other. This helped consolidate his power in Scotland that rivals Elizabeth's power in England. He was able to be head of the Presbyterian Church, a branch of the Protestant Christian Church, and also creates his own translation of the Bible. It is actually during James I's reign of England that the holiday on the 5th of November in England is created, where Guy Fawkes gathers a bunch of conspirators and tries to blow up Parliament, and this ends up becoming the plot of V for Vendetta, which is a movie that I enjoy, and I recommend all of you go watch it. So, just a little fun fact. While on a trip back from returning to Denmark with his newly wedded wife, James claims to have first-hand experience with witches when a storm almost destroys his ship. Around this time, several people were accused of witchcraft in order to kill him, called the Northborough Witch Trials. After this experience as king, James amplifies the paranoia by witches by writing Demonology, a book arguing that witches were real and aligned themselves with the devil, encouraging harsh punishments for witchcraft. Framed witch hunting as morally and religiously required, James also encouraged a tight leash on witchcraft laws, implementing the Witchcraft Act of 1604. Due to his education in his early life, James's Christian view of the devil is that the devil was actively against God due to his position in both England and Scotland. Whatever he believed in, his people were surely to follow. Shakespeare's Macbeth is a tragedy about ambition and power. A Scottish general named Macbeth hears of a prophecy told by 3 witches saying that he will become king and have immense power, and becomes paranoid and loses himself in the process of trying to keep it. Shakespeare utilizes the negativity made by King James I of England and 6 of Scotland about witches to personify power and to show that power given to a single mortal man, or more specifically Macbeth, and how it affects the people around him, further causing the balance of nature to break. Like I was saying previously, James had been born to power shortly after being born. Literally a year after being born, he was crowned king, and due to him being manipulated at such a short age, he was paranoid. His fear of witches began to reinforce his fear. It was out of James's own personal experience that made him do a lot of the things that had to deal with witches. In the article written about James I and Macbeth, Hal V. Calhoun writes, James's work is a statement of personal beliefs rather than a scholarly study of the subject, and consequently was respected in that light by all those who sought to integrate themselves into the king's favor. To appease King James, Shakespeare uses the witches to represent power in Macbeth. For example, in the very first act of the play, the witches speak, "All hail Macbeth, thou shalt be the king hereafter." The witches can see the future where Macbeth is king, implementing the idea onto Macbeth. But the real danger isn't just the witches in the play. The witches didn't forcibly make Macbeth kill his own king. It was human ambition, whether it was his wife's or his own. Human ambition is just as guilty as the witches in the play. The witches also corrupt Macbeth into changing his whole character throughout the play, transitioning me into my next topic. In the beginning of the play, we see Macbeth being the standard for a warrior, brave, confident, and loyal to his king. But after his encounter with the witches, he is brought with the realization that he will gain power and crown king. After being told this news, Lady Macbeth jumps at the opportunity to gain new power. As we read further into the play, you can start to realize Macbeth and his wife have this reversal roleplay thing going on in their relationship. Frank McGinnis further consolidates this idea in his essay. In the truest sense, this is a pair deeply energized by the rules of the roleplay, and the roles are ferocious in their reversal. This reversal of conventional behavior is a marvelous act of love. Lady Macbeth seems to be the more masculine person in their relationship, while Macbeth is seeming to be the more passive partner. And to us, this seems like the norm because they have been doing this since the start of the play. But as we see Macbeth start to spiral out of control and lose his sanity, he starts to lash back at her. Be innocent of knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed. Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day. And because it has already been established that Macbeth and his wife have this role play kind of thing going on with each other, we know that this is out of the norm for our protagonist. We see him in real time start to lose himself, because in this quote we see that he is straight up insulting her by calling her dearest Chuck, which is a condescending term, and doesn't even tell her his plan to kill Banquo. While on the topic of Banquo, we can also see Macbeth start to change on him. At the start of the play, they are the best of pals, comrade in arms, and loyal allies to King Duncan. But as Macbeth is going on deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, along with Macbeth's ambition for power, Banquo grows suspicious of Macbeth. As a result, Macbeth literally kills his brother in arms. Not literally, but he sends murderers to kill him, and his child. We can clearly see that Macbeth has lost it and is willing to do whatever to gain power. This all stems from the witches giving said power to him and what it has done to his mental. James I of England can also be aligned with Macbeth with the power, because as I was saying earlier, James is paranoid in how his power can be taken from him, especially because it was given to him at such a young age. In addition to his belief about witches, this created a very paranoid life for James, which resulted into him keeping a very close circle of friends and being suspicious of the nobles around him. This also stemmed from the fact that he was kidnapped from an early age, and then the assassination attempt from Guy Fawkes on the 5th of November. The witches in Shakespeare play represent power because they are linked to chaos and disorder. Since their power is shown to disrupt the balance of natural order, it shows us that they are not of this world. This can first be proven by how they speak. A foot in Shakespearean literature is a measure of poetry or rhythm, breaking up each word into syllables, with trimeter being 3 per foot, tetrameter being 4, and pentameter being 5, with iambic and trochaic talking about when someone is putting stress into the word. Throughout the play, the characters are speaking iambic pentameter. Macbeth is speaking in iambic pentameter in his very first line of dialogue. "Is foul and fair a day I have not seen." But as we read further into the play, we can see him break this. More on that later, but what I want to focus on right now is how the witches speak. When we see the witches casting a spell, we see them in trochaic tetrameter, with the word being left without its pair. This shows us how the witches are not of this world and not on the same level as the mortals speaking in iambic pentameter. The weird sisters hand in hand, posters of sea and land, thus do go about. We can also see Macbeth break his iambic pentameter from time to time. This shows us that he's in distress and losing the ability to speak in an intellectual way. This can especially be analyzed in the banquet scene in Act 3, Scene 4. Banquo's killer has arrived to the banquet to announce to Macbeth that Banquo is dead, but his son Flance has escaped. We can clearly see that Macbeth is fine and able to speak properly while greeting his guests. "You know your own degrees. Sit down at first, and last a hearty welcome." But after Macbeth learns of Flance's escape, he starts to crack in his facade he has created. He has figuratively started to sweat and is showing in the way he speaks. "But now I am cabined, crippled, and confined, bound in, to saucy doubts and fears." Then it worsens as Macbeth goes into an episode and sees Banquo's ghost at the dinner, sitting in his own chair. But as this goes on, Lady Macbeth is actively trying to bring him back to iambic pentameter by sharing lines with him, completing a 10-syllable unit. "Prithee, see there, behold, look low, how say you? What quite unmanned in folly?" We can see Lady trying to balance out whatever broken literature Macbeth is speaking by interrupting him and leading him into the right direction. She eventually tells the others that this is normal. She is doing everything in her power to make Macbeth not seem like a crazy lunatic. Lady eventually tells the others to leave in order not to make the episode worse. Then as the nobles leave, we see the pressure of King leave Macbeth, with Ghost leaving the scene soon after the nobles leave as well. He regains control of himself and seems to be more ruthless and cold. He knows now what he must do and what he will have to do in order to achieve his goal, whether it is to destroy the humanity in him and the relationships around him. He then returns to order by speaking in iambic pentameter, saying that he will go see the witches the following day. I will tomorrow, and betimes I will, to the weird sisters, I am in blood. Stepped in so for that should I wait no more, returning as tedious as go were. Act 3, Scene 4 is a great representation of how natural order is broken, not only with the way Macbeth speaks, but the way the relationship changes between Macbeth and his wife. In the last few lines of the scene, we start to see Macbeth isolate himself from his wife. We've seen him speak to her as if she was his queen. The witches are the catalyst of the episode in which Macbeth experiences because they have planted these ideas into Macbeth's head. At the same time, when they awaken Macbeth's ambition to become king, they also awaken a conflict within Macbeth himself. His episode reveals that the witches also have psychological powers, not just magic. The loss of control shows how dangerous the influence of the witches is. As we have seen earlier, the witches' influence leads to Macbeth killing his own king, disrupting the natural chain of kings. During the banquet scene, we can see how the witches have caused disorder within Macbeth, but his role as king. The other lord starts to question Macbeth, then Lady Macbeth takes charge in order to restore balance and order. This represents the power that is unstable when unnatural. This then causes human relationships and authority to destabilize, which Macbeth experiences firsthand. At Macbeth's return to iambic pentameter, we see Macbeth adapt to the witch's power, resolving to him acting decisively and using his knowledge of what is to come in order to dominate. Using the power given to him by the witches, turning prophecy into personal ambition. This all helps me prove that Shakespeare wrote Macbeth in order to appease James I's belief of witches and their unnatural abilities. For example, how witches use storms in order to move one place to another. Calhoun writes, "The witches flying was a common Scottish and continental notion. Their habit of flight is reflected in Macbeth's curse. King James in Demology had stated that witches were often seen invisible while riding through the air. This could explain their vanishing so abruptly," noted by Banquo. Shakespeare's Macbeth is a play that shows us how power can corrupt oneself and the people around him. And Shakespeare teaches us that by using witches as a familiar for power. Power which given to one person starts to cause paranoia around himself and destroys humanity slowly but surely. Shakespeare uses King James I of England and VI of Scotland as a blueprint for Macbeth, seeing how James is very fond of the idea of witches. He appeases to his now king by including his reachers in his play. Macbeth, to me, is a warning of what ambition can do to someone, because this whole thing didn't start out just because the witches had told Macbeth about the prophecy of him becoming king. But Macbeth's human ambition to become greater ended up engulfing his entire mindset, eventually leading him to lose his wife, losing the closest thing he has to a brother, causing Macbeth to be alone with nothing left but his ambition to be what he already has. With nobody to enjoy the power with, his increasing paranoia at the sight of ghosts, he starts to isolate himself. Shakespeare uses the ambition as a corrupting force that undermines reason, destroys relationships, and leaves those who pursue it consumed by their own fear and loneliness. Ultimately, Macbeth demonstrates that any pursuit of power at any cost will lead to both internal torment and social breakdown, with the witches being at the heart of the story.